Hello there and welcome. Tonight, I invite you to drift away from the noise of now and wander with me into the winding cobbled alleys of the past, where the moonlight is soft, history hums gently beneath the surface, and the lives of people long gone whisper their forgotten tales. Close your eyes if you'd like. Let the world fall away for a while. You're safe here. We're going to take our time together to explore an age that gleamed on the surface, but underneath was darker, colder, and far more difficult than the paintings and poetry might have us believe. This is the story of why life truly, deeply, terribly sucked during the Renaissance era. And our story begins, not with artists or kings, not with gold-leafed manuscripts or majestic domes, but with something far more fundamental. Let me take you to the beginning, to the mud, the hunger, and the very foundation of existence. The sun rises slowly over a stretch of countryside in what is now Tuscany. The air is damp, heavy with morning fog. A woman named Caterina stirs awake on a lice-ridden straw mattress, her breath visible in the freezing spring air. Her hands, rough and calloused, grip the edges of a tattered wool blanket that's barely thick enough to keep out the chill. She's hungry. She was hungry yesterday too, and the day before. Caterina is a peasant. Not the romantic kind. No flower baskets or strolling minstrels here. Just dirt, fields, broken backs, and relentless toil. You see, during the Renaissance, roughly from the 14th to the 17th century, about 80 to 90% of Europe's population lived in rural areas. Life for them was unimaginably hard. Far removed from the intellectual salons and glittering courts of Florence or Paris, the average peasant's life was bound to the soil, the seasons, and the whims of the weather. It was, quite literally, a life of survival. Caterina's day begins before the sun has fully risen. She wakes to the sound of her children coughing in the corner. There's no medicine, no doctor, not for miles. The priest is the closest thing to a healer here, and his best cure for fever is prayer. Breakfast, a piece of bread, if there's any left, maybe a turnip, maybe. The rest of their food, rough grains, bitter greens, and on rare days, a bit of fatty pork, must be rationed to stretch through the week. There is no grocery store, no pantry, no certainty. One bad crop could mean hunger. Two could mean death. Imagine the anxiety of that every year, wondering if the barley will ripen in time, wondering if the rain will come, or if it will come too much and flood everything. You don't control the weather. You don't own the land. You don't even get to choose what you grow. That belongs to your landlord, a nobleman with a sword on his hip and an estate far away. Caterina and her family are serfs. And while serfdom was beginning to decline in some parts of Europe during the Renaissance, in others it tightened its grip. Serfs were not quite slaves, but not truly free either. They were bound to the land they worked on. They owed labour, taxes, and a portion of their crops to their lord. In return, they got protection, which usually meant not much more than being ignored unless someone came to steal from them. Let's pause here just for a moment and feel what that life was like. The mud squishing beneath your feet, the cold seeping into your fingers, even in late spring, the smell of unwashed bodies, smoke from the hearth, and the ever-present tang of manure. You haven't bathed in weeks. There's no soap, no hot water, no privacy, and yet there is no time to rest. No such thing as weekend. The word doesn't exist for Caterina. There is always work to be done. Weeding, planting, reaping, chopping firewood, hauling water, caring for children, patching clothes, feeding animals, and doing it all again, day after day. Childbirth, too, was a brutal ordeal. Caterina lost her first baby in winter. The second survived, though barely. There were no midwives trained in science, only tradition passed down in whispers. The chances of dying in childbirth were high. And if the mother survived, there was still a good chance the baby would not. Nearly half of all children born during the Renaissance died before the age of 5. Let that sink in. Half. Every child was a gamble. Every pregnancy a risk. Now, let's talk about that golden glow of Renaissance art, the kind that drapes across museum walls today. You might think of Botticelli's Venus rising from the sea, her hair curling like waves, serene and beautiful. But Botticelli's Florence was a place of profound inequality. For every merchant turned patron commissioning masterpieces, there were hundreds of workers, masons, bakers and beggars whose stories weren't painted because no one cared to paint them. Caterina, of course, has never seen a painting. She can't read. Neither can her husband. Books are rare, expensive, and mostly written in Latin, the language of scholars and clergy. Knowledge, like land and wealth, is not for people like her. The Renaissance may have been a rebirth of classical learning, but only for the very, very few. So when people say the Renaissance was a time of flourishing, they are not wrong, but they are not complete. Because for Caterina and the millions like her, it was not a time of music and light. It was cold. It was harsh. It was hunger and fear and aching knees. It was doing the same things your parents did and your grandparents, and knowing your children will too. Not out of tradition, but because there is no other choice. And still, there is something quietly beautiful in her story, in her endurance, in her small joys, a song hummed while grinding grain, a stolen kiss in the barn, the warmth of a child's sleepy hand curling around hers in the dark. That too is part of the Renaissance, but it doesn't make it any less hard. Now, my friend, rest your eyes for a moment. Because our journey is only just beginning, we've barely scratched the surface of this gilded, grinding age. When you're ready, we'll travel further, into the cities, the disease, the superstition, and the shadows that made this era as terrifying as it was transformative. The sun lifts slowly over the rooftops of Florence now, casting long golden fingers across tiled domes and narrow alleys. The countryside lies behind us and the city beckons. But this isn't the Florence of travel brochures or museum tours. It is loud, it is grimy, it is restless, and under the surface it is fragile, dangerously so. The city is waking up, and so is a boy named Matteo. He sleeps on a wooden bench beside his father's workshop, a small, smoky room that smells of iron, leather, and old sweat. His father is a cobbler, or rather a man trying to be one in a street filled with too many cobblers and too few coins. The competition is brutal. Survival is not just about craftsmanship, but about knowing the right people, paying the right bribes, and keeping your head low. Matteo is 12. He works every day, pounding nails into soles, stitching torn straps, delivering shoes to people who rarely look him in the eye. He hasn't seen a classroom. The idea of education is distant, like a rumour from a faraway land. In Renaissance cities, formal schooling is a privilege reserved for the sons of merchants, bankers and nobles. Matteo, like most, learns to survive, not to study. And yet he's lucky, because he's alive. You see, in cities like Florence, Venice and Milan, the Renaissance bloomed in oil paints and marble, but it also festered in shadows. Disease, real and imagined, was everywhere. Open gutters ran through the streets, carrying refuse and filth. Human waste mingled with horse manure and kitchen scraps. The air smelled of rot and ash and something else, something sickly and unshakable. In 1348, long before Matteo was born, the Black Death swept through Italy. It returned again and again throughout the Renaissance like a ghost that refused to be banished. Each outbreak brought panic. Streets emptied, churches overflowed, and the bells tolled for hours. Rich or poor, it made little difference. The plague killed indiscriminately, though the poor died faster, their homes smaller, dirtier, tighter. The fear of illness shaped everything. People wore charms, amulets, and sprigs of herbs around their necks, hoping to ward off evil humours. Physicians, if they could be called that, diagnosed sickness by the colour of your urine or the alignment of the stars. Bloodletting was common, leeches a standard prescription. And when death came, it was sudden and messy. Not the poetic, candlelit deaths of operas or ballads, no. It was vomiting, fever, blackened limbs. Neighbours stopped visiting, priests grew hoarse from last rites, entire neighbourhoods were boarded up. But disease wasn't the only thing in the air. There was also fire, the fire of fear, of suspicion, of rage. Florence, like many Renaissance cities, was built on a powder keg of inequality. The Medici family, those famed patrons of the arts, ruled with velvet gloves and iron fists. Beneath them were merchants, skilled tradesmen, and then the mass of urban poor. The gap was wide and widening. Bread prices could spark riots, taxes broke families, and when the authorities couldn't control the tension, they blamed someone. Jews, witches, foreigners, heretics, all were easy targets. Let me tell you a story, a real one. In the winter of 1478, a midwife named Annetta was dragged from her home in Siena. A child had died shortly after birth, and the family, grief-stricken and desperate, pointed fingers. Annetta, they said, was a strega, a witch. She had spoken words in Latin. She had burned herbs. She had whispered to the moon. That was enough. She was imprisoned, questioned and tortured. No lawyer, no trial in the modern sense. Confession under pain was considered truth. She admitted to what they wanted. They always did. She was executed by hanging. The townsfolk whispered afterward that they had seen the devil's face in the clouds. This was not rare. Superstition ruled where science had not yet stepped in. Medicine, religion and fear intertwined like tangled roots. A child with a birthmark might be thought cursed. A woman with too much knowledge, especially of herbs, anatomy or healing, was dangerous. The Renaissance did not love clever women. It feared them. And then, of course, there were the fires. In Florence, a Dominican friar named Girolamo Savonarola rose to power preaching of moral purity and apocalyptic judgment. In 1497, he led what came to be called the bonfire of the vanities. People were encouraged, no, demanded, to throw their mirrors, cosmetics, fine clothes, playing cards and books into the flames. Artworks, too. Priceless works of Renaissance creativity were burned in the name of piety. Matteo, now 15, watched from a rooftop as flames devoured a painted mask his mother had once worn at carnival. She died last spring. Fever. No time for grieving. His father grows quieter each day. The business falters. There are whispers of new taxes, of war again, always war. Florence, despite its grandeur, is a city under constant threat. French armies, papal plots, mercenary uprisings. Violence isn't some abstract fear, it's part of life. A wrong word can lead to arrest. A wrong religion can end in death. And so Matteo walks carefully, keeps his eyes low, but even that won't save him forever. One night, he hears boots outside, shouting. A neighbour is being dragged away, accused of sedition, of printing pamphlets that criticise the city council. Matteo doesn't know what sedition means, but he sees the blood the next morning, and that tells him enough. And yet amid the blood and plague, the beatings and burnings, people keep going. They laugh in taverns, they tell jokes in bread lines, they carve beautiful things into wood, into marble, into memory. Because life, even when it is hard, insists on itself. But it is not fair. The Renaissance, for all its glowing promises, is not a rebirth for the many. It is a stage lit for the few. The rest are shadows in the wings, working, bleeding, watching. Matteo does not dream of fame or art. He dreams of bread, of warmth, of making it through the winter without coughing up blood. And that, more than anything, is why life in the Renaissance, in all its gilded, painted splendour, was often unbearably, heartbreakingly hard. Let us stay with that truth for a moment, before we journey deeper still. The winds shift now, and we follow them northward, away from the stone palazzos of Italy to the colder, darker streets of a German town nestled beside a slow-moving river. It is late autumn, and the trees are almost bare. The air carries the faint smell of smoke, and the days are growing shorter, the nights longer and harder to endure. Here in the town of Mainz, the world is changing, but not always in ways that make life easier. A man named Jakob wakes before dawn, his breath puffing into mist in the unheated attic he shares with his wife, 2 daughters, and an ageing aunt who hasn't spoken a clear word in months. The roof leaks when it rains, and rats scurry through the floorboards at night, drawn by the scent of bread crusts and spoiled turnips. Jakob is a printer, or rather he is a labourer in a print shop. The owner is a clever man named Heinrich, who boasts often and loudly that his workshop is changing the world. He is not wrong. The printing press, born right here in Mainz just decades earlier, has begun to reshape how ideas move, how power works, and how secrets can no longer be kept. But for Jakob, the printing press means long hours bent over trays of type, ink-stained fingers, and endless monotony. The pieces of type, tiny lead letters, must be set by hand, one by one, backward and precise. A single mistake can ruin an entire page. The ink must be mixed just right. The paper, expensive and fragile, must be laid perfectly. There is no room for error. The shop is dimly lit by small windows and smoky lamps. The smell of oil, ink and sweat lingers in the air. Jacob's back aches constantly. His fingertips are cracked. His eyes strain as he squints at Latin. He cannot read. Most printers can't. Literacy is still rare among the labouring class, even here, even now. But oh, the irony. Jacob's work helps spread books, knowledge, treatises and manifestos. But he understands almost none of it. The books are bought by the wealthy, the church, universities, aristocrats. Not him. He has never owned a book. And though the world is printing more words than ever before, words alone cannot feed his children. There is a myth, a seductive one, that the Renaissance was a time of sudden enlightenment, that people everywhere began to think freely, question authority, and rise above ignorance. But ideas do not change lives overnight. Not when bellies are empty, not when winters are long. Jacob's wife Greta spends her days in the laundry of a local convent. She hauls buckets of freezing water, scrubs stained linen with caustic lye, and is paid in stale bread and used candles. Her hands are always red, raw, trembling. Yet she returns home every night and hums lullabies to her daughters as if the world outside their attic isn't crumbling. They are poor, but they are not alone. Mainz, like many towns in the Holy Roman Empire, is packed tightly with families just like Jacob's, caught in the slow, grinding middle of change. The printing press is not the only transformation. Trade routes are shifting, guilds are tightening their rules, religious tensions simmer just beneath the surface, and always there is the looming spectre of violence. In the streets, soldiers parade in polished boots and bright banners, but everyone knows what they really are. Hired swords, loyal to whoever pays best. War is constant, between kingdoms, between dukes, between the Pope and emperors. Young men are taken. Some return, most do not. Jacob dreads the knock on the door that will come one day, the conscription notice. He has no money to bribe the recruiter. If his name is drawn, he will go. And if he goes, his family will starve. So he keeps his head down, works faster, accepts less. One evening, Heinrich, the printer, returns from a trip to Wittenberg, drunk on wine and ideas. He boasts of a man named Luther, a monk, a troublemaker, a firebrand. "He's nailed a list to the church door!" Heinrich cackles. "It's causing a storm!" Jacob does not understand what's so funny. But over the next months, the print shop buzzes. Hundreds of copies of Luther's words are set and pressed and bundled, in German, not Latin. And this is new, dangerous, explosive. People begin to whisper. Sermons grow tense, priests argue, neighbours avoid eye contact. Luther's Reformation has begun, and while it will change the course of history, it also brings fear, because when ideas spread faster than understanding, fires follow. Soon, books are burned in one square, while in another, monks are chased from their monasteries. Some call it progress, others call it blasphemy. For Jacob, it is simply another reason to be afraid. One night, he walks home late after repairing a jammed press. As he turns onto his street, he sees torches in the distance, not festive ones, angry ones. Men with crude symbols painted on their cloaks, shouting about false priests and corrupt councils. A neighbour's window is smashed. Someone screams. He hurries home, bolts the door, holds his family close. Religious violence is no longer a distant rumour. It has come to Mainz. It will come to Wittenberg, to Strasbourg, to Paris, to Rome. Protestants, Catholics, Huguenots, Anabaptists, each convinced they are righteous, each certain the others must be silenced. And in the middle, Jacob, Greta, their daughters. People like them are the soil on which these battles are fought, not the generals, not the reformers, but the quiet poor many who are caught in the storms of the few. The Renaissance, in its grand arc, gave birth to the modern world, but for every Gutenberg and Luther, there were thousands of Jacobs who suffered the cost of change without sharing its rewards. The press brought truth and lies, hope and terror. Jacob dreams not of theology or politics, but of enough coins to buy meat once a week, boots for his daughters, of one day being able to say no to a master, a soldier, a king. But tonight he simply prays they are not next. Outside, the wind howls like a chorus of voices, and in a print shop down the alley, a fresh stack of pamphlets cools in the dark, the ink still damp, the words still dangerous. Far to the west now, beyond the frosty valleys and smoky towns of the German principalities, the great Atlantic Ocean laps gently at the rocky shores of a small coastal village in Portugal. The air here smells of salt and kelp, and the cries of gulls echo above red-tiled rooftops. The year is 1512, and the sea, vast and unknowable, is calling louder than ever before. A boy named Thomas stands barefoot at the edge of a crumbling dock, watching as men with sun-leathered skin and hollow eyes haul barrels of salted fish and bundles of dried fruit onto a battered caravel. The ship is bound for somewhere far, maybe Africa, maybe India, maybe beyond. No one asks anymore. The ocean has become a map of ambition, drawn not with ink, but with bones. Tomas is 14 and already his hands are calloused from nets and rope. His father was a fisherman until the fever took him. Now the family survives by gathering shellfish, mending sails, and hoping for the kindness of the merchant who owns half the boats in the harbour. That merchant, Senhor Vita, is not a cruel man, but he is not kind either. He pays in copper coins, often late and always less than promised. The Age of Discovery, as it would later be called, is in full swing. Ships leave every week, flying flags of Portugal, Spain, and the ambitions of their monarchs. They carry men hungry for gold, for God, for glory. The Renaissance has brought with it a thirst for expansion, but for those left behind, like Tomas and his mother, it has brought mostly absence, silence, and grief. For every ship that returns, 3 vanish. The sea is a monster that swallows without warning. Tomas has seen the widows on his street, black-clad and hollow-eyed. He has heard the wails that rise when word arrives, a mast shattered in a storm, a hull lost to coral, a crew vanished into the mist. Still, boys line up to join, not because they seek adventure, but because hunger pushes harder than fear. And so Tomas is considering it. Senor Vitor says he's strong enough now, the pay would help. His little sister needs medicine, though none truly exists, just boiled herbs and whispered prayers. That night, as his mother kneads rough barley dough by candlelight, Tomas asks very quietly about the sea. She doesn't answer right away, just presses the dough flat over and over until her hands begin to tremble. "Your father said the same thing," she says finally, "and he never came back." The Renaissance is often painted as a time of discovery, of new worlds, new maps, new knowledge, and it was. But the discovery was not free, it came at a price. For every cartographer drawing coastlines, there were 1,000 hands rowing oars, cleaning decks and burying comrades at sea. What those Renaissance paintings do not show is the stench of spoiled meat on long voyages, the sores that opened from salted wind, the sickness that swept through cabins like fire. Scurvy, dysentery, typhus. The names mattered little. All were deadly. Aboard a ship, death was always near. Below deck, rats nested beside the grain. Fresh water turned sour after a week. Men fought over dried plums. When storms came, they prayed, vomited, and waited to die. Lightning split masts. Winds tore sails, and when the sea claimed someone, it was often without warning. 1 minute shouting, the next gone, just a splash and silence. Tomas hears these stories from a man named João, a former navigator whose leg now ends in a jagged stump. He limps through the alleys near the dock, cursing the crown and spitting black tobacco. But sometimes in a quieter mood, João speaks of the places he saw, towering cliffs in Africa, burning sands in Morocco, forests so dense they swallowed sunlight. "And the people?" Tomas asks one night. João pauses, eyes glinting beneath the brim of his salt-stained cap. "They stared at us like ghosts," he says, "and we stared at them the same. Because behind every new discovery was someone else's home. The Renaissance praised exploration, the church blessed it, the kings funded it, but the people who lived on the other end of the map, the coastal tribes of West Africa, the islanders of the Caribbean, the great civilizations of the Americas, they did not ask to be found, they did not benefit from it. Their names, their languages, their gods were treated like curiosities or threats. If they resisted, they were called savages. If they welcomed, they were betrayed. Gold was taken, people were taken, and behind every smiling painting of a European noble holding a globe, there was a village that had been burned to ash. But Tomas doesn't know all of that, not yet. All he knows is that the sea might offer something the land will not, a way out, or at least a change. By spring he makes his choice. The ship is called Santa Luzia. It is small, fast, and bound for the coast of Guinea. Tomas signs his name with a trembling hand. He doesn't tell his sister goodbye. She is asleep, curled in a blanket his mother once sewed from flour sacks. The morning he leaves, the sky is pale pink and the tide is low. His mother presses something into his hand, a small medallion with a carved wooden cross. It's cracked at the edge, worn smooth with age. "Keep this," she says. "And come home, please come home." He nods, says nothing. The ship creaks as he boards. The sails snap open. And just like that, he is part of the tide. Another name in the logbook, another dream in the wind. He will see things, he will suffer. He may not return. The Renaissance gave birth to the myth of adventure, bold men against the horizon, seeking fortune and fame. But the truth was lonelier, colder. salt-burned and sleepless. Most who went were never remembered. Most died without reaching the promised shore. And for those like Thomas who dared to follow the sea, there was no guarantee of glory, only the vast, hungry silence of the deep. The snow falls in fine, whispering sheets over a grey and crowded city. Paris in the dead of winter is a place of stone and smoke, its alleys narrow, its courtyards damp, its chimneys coughing soot into a colourless sky. It is 1523, and the Renaissance has found its way to France, not with a fanfare, but with the slow and grinding turn of the wheel. This is where we meet Isabeau. She lives in a cramped room above a tannery near the Seine, her fingers always smelling faintly of lye and ash, her clothes never fully clean. She is a laundress, though that word barely captures the weight of her days. She scrubs linens on stone boards until her knuckles bleed. She drags buckets through frozen mud. She inhales the fumes of boiling soap, breathing steam that burns and clogs her lungs. Isabeau is 26. Most women in Hurl do not live much longer than 40 if they're lucky. She already feels the ache in her spine, the pull in her hips from giving birth twice. Her first child died during a winter much like this one, a cough that turned to fever, then silence. The second, a daughter named Aline, is 6 now, small for her age, with wide eyes and a habit of holding her breath when frightened. They share a straw mattress, a dented kettle, and a cracked window stuffed with cloth to keep out the wind. There are no paintings of women like Isabeau in the galleries of the Louvre, no tapestries embroidered with her likeness, no books written in her voice, and yet she is everywhere, in every city, in every year of this so-called rebirth. The Renaissance may have been an age of rising thought, of humanism and invention, but it was also an age that placed women like her firmly in the margins, useful when needed, discarded when not. Her work is invisible, uncelebrated, expected. She wakes before the bell tolls and finishes long after dusk. She does not rest unless forced by illness. There are no holidays without labour, no sick leave, no protection. If she complains, she can be replaced. If she is injured, there is no compensation, no doctor. And Paris, despite its artists and architects, is no paradise. The streets are riddled with waste. Chamber pots empty into the gutters. Rats scurry in plain sight. The wealthy ride past in carriages, clutching scented cloths to their noses. The plague has not visited this year, but its memory still lingers. At the edge of the marketplace stands a man with a signboard strung around his neck. "Beware the wrath of God," it reads, scrawled in red ink. He rings a bell and shouts of sin, of fire, of pestilence. Isabeau passes him daily, never looking him in the eye. Fear is not unusual, it is constant, but you learn to carry it. Today, the fear is not plague, but politics. France, under Francois I, is at war again, with the Emperor Charles IV, with the English, with whoever threatens his glory this week. The king, full of Renaissance pride, fancies himself a new Caesar. He has built libraries and palaces. He writes letters in Latin. He hosts scholars and painters from Italy. But the cost of his brilliance is paid in blood and bread. Taxes rise, food prices climb. Conscription knocks at every neighbourhood. Isabeau's cousin, a cooper, was taken last spring. Marched south with a wooden spear and promises of coin. He never returned. There is talk of a meat shortage, of the baker raising prices again, of riots in Rouen. But talk is dangerous. The wrong word can be heard by the wrong ear. So most keep their heads down, their mouths shut. Even so, rebellion simmers beneath the surface. In secret corners of Paris, pamphlets circulate, small, handwritten, sometimes printed on stolen presses. They speak of reform, of corruption in the church, of new ideas from the German lands. They say the Pope is no more holy than a merchant. That scripture should belong to the people. Isabeau cannot read, but she sees the fear in the priest's eyes when he preaches louder than usual. She sees the guards patrolling more often. She knows something is shifting. Change is near, but no one knows what shape it will take. Meanwhile, the daily grind continues. She scrapes ice from the basin. She boils water. She beats cloth against stone. She presses, folds, carries. Aline waits patiently by the hearth, wrapping her feet in old wool. Sometimes, if Isabeau is lucky, a wealthy client will slip her a copper or two in thanks. More often they complain of a wrinkle, a stain, a scent. One woman, dressed in blue velvet and pearls, hands over a silk camise and says without meeting Isabeau's eyes, "If it tears, I'll have your wages docked." Isabeau bites her tongue, nods. She wonders what it would feel like to wear silk, to walk without hunger, gnawing the corners of her mind, to be seen. The city hums around her. Carriages rumble past, merchants shout their wares, students argue in Latin near the university steps. Somewhere in a warm hall, a poet is writing a sonnet about love. Somewhere else, a sculptor chips marble into the curve of a goddess's shoulder. And here, in the chill of morning, Isabeau lifts a dripping sheet from the tub and wrings it out with aching hands. There is beauty in this era. Yes, but it is unevenly spread, concentrated in gilded rooms, framed in gold, wrapped in silks. For the laundress, for the midwife, for the servant and the seamstress, the Renaissance is not a time of enlightenment. It is a time of survival, and yet still somehow they live, they endure. That night, Isabeau holds Aline close. She hums an old tune, one her mother used to sing before the world grew heavy. Aline, half asleep, asks, "Will things be better someday?" Isabeau doesn't answer. She just strokes her daughter's hair and whispers, "Sleep now," because hope is too fragile to speak aloud, and dreams are the only escape she can afford. The bells of Seville toll through thick morning fog, echoing between orange trees and sandstone towers. It is 15:30, and the city is bursting at the seams, with gold, with people, with tension. The port has swelled with ships returning from the New World, their bellies heavy with silver, their decks echoing with the footsteps of sailors and soldiers. But beneath the wealth, beneath the fanfare, a quieter war is being waged, not with swords or cannon, but with silence, fear, and the flame. This is where Diego lives. He is neither sailor nor priest, not noble nor beggar. He is a converso, a descendant of Jews who were forced to convert to Christianity generations ago when the edicts came down like thunder. Officially, he is a good Catholic. He attends Mass, he crosses himself, he says the right words at the right time. But he is always watching, always listening. Because in Spain, during this most devout era of the Renaissance, faith is not just a belief, it is a test, a trap, a mirror turned toward your soul by strangers. And Diego's reflection is never quite trusted. He works in a small apothecary behind the cathedral, measuring powders and mixing syrups for the ailments of the rich. He has a steady hand, a sharp mind, and an ear for remedies passed down from ancestors who once studied under Jewish physicians in Cordoba. Scholars once revered, now erased. His shop is quiet, tucked between a silversmith and a tavern. Most days are simple. Women seeking tinctures for their nerves, men asking for tonics against impotence, merchants demanding headache cures before their long rides north. He makes no promises. He simply works. Quickly. Carefully, because he cannot afford mistakes. The Inquisition has eyes everywhere. It began decades ago, a campaign to cleanse Spain of heresy, to purify the soul of the kingdom. Heretics, they called them. Those who practiced Judaism or Islam in secret. Those who questioned the Pope, who read forbidden books, who believed too deeply in science or not enough in saints. The Inquisition promised righteousness, but it delivered terror. And now it is woven into daily life. There is a tribunal just blocks away from Diego's home. Stone walls, heavy doors, small windows. At night he hears horses arriving, boots on cobblestones, cries swallowed by the dark. Some are accused of apostasy, others of sorcery, still others simply of saying the wrong thing, or owning the wrong book, or lighting candles on the wrong night. There is no defense against whispers. Diego's neighbor, an old man named Mateo, disappeared last month. His wife said he had spoken too fondly of the old days, of the Hebrew songs his mother once sang. That was enough. His home was searched, his belongings taken, his name spoken only in hushed tones now. Everyone knows what happens behind those doors. Torture is not just a rumour, it is policy. Authorised, sanctified. The accused are bound, stretched, broken until they confess. And when they do, they are paraded through the streets in a auto-da-fe, a ritual of penance and punishment, watched by crowds who cheer and tremble in equal measure. Sometimes they are whipped, sometimes exiled, sometimes burned. Diego has never seen a burning, but he has smelled the smoke. He has learned to hide everything. His books are hidden beneath the floorboards. His mother's ring, engraved with a star, is buried in the garden. He smiles politely when questioned. He never speaks of family history. He attends confession twice a week. Too often might be suspicious. Too little more so. But the fear is constant. Heavy. Always there, like a stone pressing against his ribs. And yet, even here in this city of wealth and fire, the Renaissance whispers through the cracks. He reads by candlelight, long after curfew. Medical treatises smuggled in from Italy, translations of Galen, of Avicenna, of newer minds writing now in Amsterdam, Lyon and Padua. These are not books of rebellion, they are books of healing. But to the wrong eyes, they are heresy. Science, after all, threatens dogma. One evening, a merchant's daughter comes to his shop. Her name is Clara. She is pale, with eyes rimmed red from tears. Her brother is ill, burning with fever, trembling, unable to speak. The family physician has declared it a curse. The priest has recommended prayer. Diego, despite himself, goes. The boy lies in a dark room, sweat slick on his skin, lips cracked. The family stands back, unsure whether they are watching an illness or a punishment. Diego examines the boy's eyes, his pulse, the swell of his neck. It is not a curse. It is an infection, simple, dangerous, treatable. He mixes a tincture, leaves careful instructions, refuses the coins offered. Clara thanks him, her voice barely a whisper. But days later, a man arrives at his shop, hooded, silent. He leaves a sealed letter, a summons. Diego's name has reached the ears of the Holy Office. They want to ask about his methods, his books, his influences. The next morning, Diego does not open his shop. He packs only what he can carry. A satchel, a loaf of bread, the ring from his mother dug from the earth. He does not say goodbye, not to the apothecary, not to the city, not to Clara. He walks out before sunrise, following a road that leads toward the mountains, toward the border, toward exile. Because in the Spain of the Renaissance, knowledge can be fatal. Faith here is not a matter of spirit, it is surveillance. And the fire that once illuminated the great cities of Al-Andalus now burns only as warning, bright and unforgiving, licking at the edges of every soul deemed impure. In the shadows of cathedrals and beneath the scent of incense, men like Diego vanish, not because they are guilty, but because they remember, because they think, because they do not fit into the box the crown has built. And so he walks, quietly, head down. The sun is rising behind him, but he dares not turn to face it. The smell of wet wool and coal smoke hangs thick in the air. It clings to the damp timbers of a low-ceilinged cottage nestled deep in the countryside of Fife, Scotland. Outside, the heather is heavy with rain and the hills roll in quiet grey folds under a slate-coloured sky. It is 1547 and the Renaissance, that great flowering of ideas, beauty and curiosity, has barely touched this far corner of the British Isles. Inside the cottage, a boy named Alastair crouches by the hearth, feeding scraps of peat into a low-burning fire. His cheeks are smudged with ash. His tunic is patched at the elbows. A pair of chickens cluck and peck near the door, indifferent to the cold, the mud, or the tension hanging in the air like mist. Alastair is 9 years old. His father is not home. He's off on a forced march, conscripted to defend the Laird's land against English troops pushing north again. The wars come in waves, brutal, uninvited, wearing different coats of arms, but always leaving the same trail of ruin. For Alastair, war is not a story told in ballads or books. It is an absence, a hunger, a sudden knock in the night. His mother Morag weaves by the window with trembling fingers. The wool is rough and the spinning wheel squeaks with each slow turn. They are behind on their tithes. The harvest was thin, the barley mildewed in the rain, and the pigs died weeks ago. Some sickness that swept through the valley like a curse. She hasn't told the bailiff yet. She's hoping, praying for her husband's return before the collectors come. But in the highlands and lowlands alike, prayer rarely moves faster than punishment. This is Scotland in the Renaissance, caught between old ways and foreign crowns, between clan and crown, between the Catholic Mass and the rising tide of Protestant fire. In the cities, the preachers are growing bolder. In the countryside, the people simply try to survive. Alastair has never seen a cathedral or a painting or a book. There is no school in the village. The nearest chapel is a long walk over a boggy road, and the priest, old Father Callan, visits only once a month. When he does, he carries bread, wine and warnings. Obey your lord, he says. Obey the king. Fear the English. Fear sin. Fear the end. And yet, the old ways persist. In the woods beyond the village, women still gather herbs by moonlight. They whisper in Gaelic, not Latin. They leave stones on graves and sing to the wind. These practices are quiet now, not hidden exactly, but softened. camouflaged behind prayers to Mary, behind wooden crucifixes carved with knots and leaves, because to be seen doing otherwise is to be marked. And the world has grown less tolerant of things it cannot name. Alastair's grandmother was such a woman, a healer, a midwife, a woman who knew when to cut the yarrow and how to quiet a fever. She died 2 winters ago, not from sickness, but from silence. A man fell ill after she tended him. When he died, the whispers began. A devil's woman, a poisoner, a witch. The laird's men came one night, took her away in chains. No one spoke of it again. But Alastair remembers the way she hummed when she ground herbs, the smell of lavender that clung to her apron, the scar on her wrist, a burn she never explained. Now, when Morag feels a fever coming on, she boils her mother's herbs in secret. She says nothing of the old prayers. She looks over her shoulder before she lights a second candle, because fear is stitched into everything now. Even the church is divided. Across the border, Henry VIII has torn Rome from England's soul, naming himself head of the church. In Scotland, the reformers follow behind, emboldened loud. Preachers cry for the burning of relics, the smashing of icons. They call for scripture in the people's tongue, not Latin but Scots, for the death of superstition. For many, this is liberation. For others, it is desecration. And for people like Morag and Alastair, it is confusion. One set of rules replaced with another, then another. New sins, new threats, new punishments. Old neighbours turn suspicious. Priests are replaced. Statues disappear from chapels overnight. Truth shifts like fog over the glens. One morning, word arrives on horseback. There's to be a sermon in the square. A new preacher from Edinburgh sent by the reformers. The villagers gather, some curious, some wary. Alastair sits beside his mother, clutching her hand. The preacher is young, his voice strong. He speaks of fire and idols, of how the church has betrayed them, of how Rome is the harlot of Babylon. He quotes scripture with fierce rhythm, his eyes sharp. Then he points to the chapel's stone Madonna. She is nothing, he says. A false comfort. Tear her down. And just like that, a few men rise and begin chipping at the stone. Alastair watches as the face crumbles. He doesn't understand why, but his chest aches. Later, at home, Morag says nothing. She just removes a small wooden carving from beneath the hearth, a figure of a woman holding a child, worn smooth from years of touch. She wraps it in cloth and buries it behind the house, to be safe. Because now it is not enough to be devout. One must be the right kind of devout. The lines are not drawn in scripture, they are drawn in blood. A week later, the tacksmen come. They take what little barley remains. They say it is for the Crown's army, for the glory of Scotland. They leave behind 2 sacks of oats and a warning, if the tithes aren't met, the land may be forfeited. Alastair watches his mother cry quietly that night. Not loud, not with drama. Just soft, slow tears that fall into the wash bucket. He wishes he was stronger. He wishes he could go south, to the cities, to where change is happening, where things are being invented and built and painted. But they are trapped here, in the damp, in the grey, in the heavy mud of survival. This is the edge of the Renaissance, not gilded, not illuminated, just cold, wet stone, and a child by the fire, listening to the rain fall on the roof, wondering if tomorrow will bring his father back, or another storm. The sun beats down on sun-baked walls and dust-streaked courtyards, casting long, sharp shadows across the golden stones of Constantinople, or as it is now called, Istanbul. It is the year 1552, and though the Renaissance has spread westward from Italy into the courts of kings and scholars, here in the Ottoman Empire the world turns to a rhythm of its own, older, vaster, and no less perilous. At the centre of this ancient city, beneath the gleaming domes of mosques and the cries of market hawkers, lives a girl named Elif. She is 15. Her feet are bare, her dress simple, her hands stained from weeks of grinding dyes into cloth at the corner textile workshop. Her fingers smell faintly of indigo and vinegar. Her arms are sore, but she does not complain. She is still lucky in a way. She is not in the palace. Because in the palace, the Topkapi, where gardens bloom and eunuchs stand guard like statues, girls are chosen for lives that are anything but their own. Elif knows this because her cousin, Yasemin, was taken 2 years ago. A visiting official noticed her during a market procession. The family was told it was an honour, a rare privilege, a path to comfort. She was sent to the imperial harem, the private quarters of the sultan. No word has come since. The harem is not what most in the West imagine it to be. Not a place of indulgence, but of order, of silence, of rules so thick they suffocate. It is a school, a prison, a ladder to power, and a pit of rivalries all at once. Girls are brought from across the empire, Circassians, Greeks, Armenians, Slavs. Some are enslaved, others like Yasemin are taken with consent, bought through fear. Once inside, they vanish, and the streets meanwhile are full of those who remain. Elif's mother, Amina, is a widow. Her husband, a coffee seller, died in a fire when Elif was small. Now, Amina mends clothes for the wives of minor officials, her needle dancing across silk that will never belong to her. Her face is veiled in public, not from fear, but from law. Modesty here is not a choice, it is expectation, reinforced not by decree alone, but by 1,000 years of tradition and 100 watchful eyes. But even behind the veil, Amina sees everything. She sees the janissaries marching in polished boots through the square. She sees the silent exchange of glances between merchant and judge. She sees the fear on the faces of those who speak too freely. Because in this city, the gateway between Europe and Asia, knowledge is power, and power is dangerous. The Renaissance has reached Istanbul, yes, but it has arrived filtered through theology, politics, and suspicion. The Sultan, Suleiman the Magnificent, is a patron of the arts. His court hosts poets, scholars, astronomers. The great architect Mimar Sinan is shaping the skyline. Miniature painters fill manuscript margins with gold. Libraries grow, and philosophy swirls behind thick curtains in candlelit salons. But it is not a renaissance of the people. It is a renaissance of the palace. Elif has never seen a miniature. She has never read a book. She knows her letters, barely, only because her mother insisted. But girls are not encouraged to study. To know too much is to invite scrutiny. To speak out of place is to invite disgrace. Instead, she listens and remembers. She remembers the stories her grandmother told, of Constantinople before the conquest, of icons and bells, of saints and ancient stones. She remembers how the city used to speak Greek and how, even now, the church bells ring faintly in the corners of Galata. But those stories are whispered now. Dangerous. The empire is tolerant in law, but suspicious in spirit. Christians and Jews may live, may worship, but always under watch and always beneath. They pay taxes for their faith. They live in segregated quarters. And they never forget that their freedom rests on the patience of the throne. Elif walks home through a twisting alley. Men call to her from shadowed doorways, even though she lowers her eyes. She knows better to answer. The streets are not hers. They never have been. She clutches her satchel tighter, full of rags and dye-stained scraps. As she turns the final corner, she pauses. On a wall, scrawled in charcoal, is a drawing, rough, simple, beautiful. A face, a woman's face, smiling, free. It will be washed away tomorrow, but tonight it glows in the dusk. At home, Amina waits with bread and lentil stew. They eat in silence. Outside, the muezzin calls to prayer. Elif watches her mother bow, then does the same. She does not always understand the words, but she respects the rhythm. Later, as the lamps dim, Elif climbs to the roof. The city glitters below, minarets, torches, domes. The Bosphorus glows like silver in the moonlight. She can hear music drifting from somewhere. A ney flute, slow and aching, and for a moment she dreams. She dreams of drawing faces, of making her own colours, of painting not for a sultan or a scholar, but for herself. But then the spell breaks. A shout echoes from the street. A door slams. Somewhere a child cries. She lies down on the cool stones, the stars blinking above her like secrets, and wonders if Yasemin ever sees the sky. In this city of marble and shadow, where east meets west and silence is survival, the Renaissance wears a different face. It glows in palaces and burns in books. But on the street, in the homes of women like Elif and Amina, it flickers. Small, quiet, and always at risk of being snuffed out. The desert wind carries with it the scent of dust, jasmine and something older, the memory of ancient things long buried. We're in Cairo now, in the year 1565. The city is vast, sprawling like a tapestry across the Nile's edge, its minarets reaching into a hazy sky. Here the Renaissance has a different rhythm, one not painted in oils or sung in courts, but inked in manuscripts and murmured in smoky libraries hidden behind worn doorways. In a modest quarter far from the grandeur of the citadel, a boy named Idris threads his way through alleyways, balancing a bundle of parchment beneath one arm and a basket of bread beneath the other. He walks quickly. The sun is low and golden, casting everything in an amber light that makes even the most broken things look momentarily whole. Idris is 13. His tunic is too big, handed down from an older brother who no longer lives here. His sandals slap against the stones. He has never left Cairo, but he knows its streets like his own breath, the quiet ones, the dangerous ones, the ones that lead to books. He is the apprentice to a blind man named Sheikh Nabil, who keeps a cramped bookshop tucked behind a spice vendor's stall. It is not a shop in the modern sense. There is no sign, no shelves, no display. Just piles of worn pages, scrolls tied with thread, ink pots, and a constant hush. The kind of hush that holds the sound of thought. Nabil had once been a scholar at Al-Azhar. They say his voice could move rooms, that his lectures wove theology and philosophy like silk. Then came the sickness. It took his sight, but not his mind. Now he sits cross-legged on a mat, surrounded by books he cannot see, dictating wisdom and correcting the boys who come to learn in secret. Because Cairo, though a city of scholars, is not free from fear. The Mamluks are gone. The Ottomans now rule. Taxes rise, spies listen, preachers thunder from the pulpits about purity and obedience. And behind closed doors, men argue over whether philosophy has any place beside faith. Many say no, which is why Nabil's shop is never full, always quiet, and never spoken of too loudly. Idris doesn't understand all the words, not yet, but he listens and remembers. He remembers the day a young man brought in a translation of Galen, a Greek physician whose works once flowed through the veins of Islamic medicine. Nabil recognized the text by the weight of its pages, the smell of its ink. He smiled faintly and began to recite passages from memory. We knew these truths, he said, long before they were called Renaissance. And it was true. While Europe flailed through its early dark centuries, the Islamic world had preserved, translated, and expanded upon the knowledge of antiquity. Algebra, astronomy, anatomy, all flowered here in the language of scholars and caliphs. But now that light flickered. War, control, suspicion, the freedom to question was shrinking. One afternoon, as Idris prepares tea, Nabil asks him to read aloud from a book of astronomy. It is old, brittle, covered in careful Arabic script and geometric diagrams. As Idris reads, his voice shaky but clear, Nabil nods slowly. The stars, he murmurs, remind us how small we are and how vast we might become. Idris is not sure what that means, but he feels it, deep in his chest like a string being pulled. Outside, Cairo groans with life. The markets pulse with sound, donkey hooves, copper bowls clanging, vendors shouting over mounds of lentils and garlic. But beyond the noise, there is tension. Ottoman governors raise levies on the poor. Judges crack down on unlicensed scholars. Whispers rise of manuscripts confiscated, students arrested. A friend of Nabil's, an old scribe named Kadir, is taken one morning after morning prayer. No trial, no explanation, just gone. Nabil says nothing. He only closes the shutters and does not speak for 2 days. That night, Idris dreams of books being burned, of pages turning to ash in his hands. He wakes sweating, heart hammering, the call to prayer ringing in the darkness. He does not tell anyone, but the fear does not go away. There is beauty here, in the way the city glows at dusk, in the sound of water being poured for wudu, in the delicate script of Quranic calligraphy etched on domes. But the Renaissance here is a tightrope, a balance between reverence and risk. To learn too much is to be arrogant. To question too deeply is to invite wrath. The mind is not yours. It belongs to God. One evening, Nabil asks Idris to retrieve a scroll hidden behind a stack of law books. It is written in both Arabic and Greek. Idris recognizes Aristotle's name. He hesitates. Is this forbidden, he whispers. Nabil tilts his head. Forbidden by whom? Idris does not answer. Nabil smiles faintly. Then read. So he does, and for a few quiet minutes, in a dim, hidden corner of a city older than memory, a boy reads words that have travelled centuries, across oceans, through empires, past fires and kings and silence. And he understands. That knowledge is a river, it flows, it changes course, it carves stone, and though tyrants may dam it, divert it, drink from it, they cannot stop it forever. But for now the water runs underground, and Idris, with ink-stained fingers and sand in his sandals, walks carefully along its edge. Not as a scholar, not as a rebel, but as a child of the Renaissance's other face. Quiet, patient, watching. The bells of Antwerp clang dully through a damp morning haze. It is 1574, and the city, once the glittering jewel of the Low Countries, is wounded, swollen with tension, its arteries clogged by soldiers, beggars, and merchants with eyes that dart like startled crows. The Renaissance here has worn a mask of prosperity, but the cracks are widening. Beneath the gold there is rot. In a cluttered attic room above a cloth dyer's shop, a man named Willem kneels by the window, watching as a company of Spanish soldiers marches through the street below. Their boots beat a grim rhythm against the cobblestones. Their banners hang limp in the mist. The neighbours, used to this sight, pretend not to watch. Willem does not move. He barely breathes. He has reason to be still. He is hiding something, not a weapon, not a fugitive, but a book. It is bound in worn leather and wrapped in cloth, hidden beneath the floorboard for weeks now. A Dutch translation of the Gospel, printed in secret, smuggled from Geneva. Illegal, heretical, a death sentence if discovered. Because the Renaissance in the Netherlands is not only about art or commerce, it is about war, a war of faith, a war of identity, a war without clear end. Willem is a printer, at least he used to be. Before the crackdown, before the Duke of Alba's Council of Troubles, called by many the Council of Blood, began its reign of terror. Thousands executed, many more imprisoned, suspicion blooming like mould in every alley. He once ran a small press with his brother, quiet, discreet, producing calendars, hymns, treatises. But when the Protestants rose up and the Spanish crown answered with fire, the printing stopped. His brother disappeared. Their shop was burned. Willem survived only because he fled before dawn with a satchel full of papers and a name he no longer uses in public. Now he copies letters for the dyer, scrapes wax from ink blocks, and keeps his head down. At night he reads by candlelight, slowly, reverently. The words in the book are plain, honest, so different from the Latin chants of his youth. He does not consider himself dangerous. He believes in peace, in prayer, in the quiet revolution of knowing. But the Inquisition sees no such nuance. To read the gospel in the tongue of the people is to challenge the authority of Rome. To speak the word aloud in a workshop, in a barn, in a forest clearing, this is sedition. The city is full of whispers. Men gather in cellars. Women pass messages sewn into hems. Children are taught psalms in secret. There are reports of entire villages burned, their pastors hanged from trees, their Bibles thrown into rivers, and yet they keep reading because the printed word has done something irreversible. It has opened a door. Antwerp once stood at the crossroads of Europe. Merchants brought spices, fabrics and ideas from every direction. Artists like Bruegel and Van Eyck painted everyday life with startling honesty. Maps were drawn, stars charted, ships built. But now war tightens around it like a noose. Spanish troops garrison in crumbling churches. Markets fall silent under curfews. Families vanish overnight. The river, once thick with trade, now carries soldiers and rumours. Willem does not dare visit the old cathedral. It is too public. He worships in silence, with verses murmured under breath, with ink-stained fingers folded in the dark. One evening, the dyer's daughter, Marguerite, knocks gently on his door. She is 17, clever, quiet, often barefoot. She holds out a scrap of paper. "It came from Bruges," she says. "It is a hymn, handwritten." The melody he recognises from long ago, when his mother still sang. He closes his eyes as he reads it. "Shall I not trust in thee, my guide so strong and true?" He looks up at her. She is smiling, faintly, but her eyes are red. "They took her," she whispers. "Her aunt, arrested during a raid on a gathering in the woods. Marguerite does not know if she is alive. No one does." Willem folds the hymn, hides it, lights a candle. "Read with me," he says, and together they read, not with voices but with their eyes, line by line, word by word. The Renaissance brought many things to the Low Countries. Art, trade, innovation, but it also brought conflict, because knowledge does not ask permission. It spreads, it questions. And the old powers, feeling the ground shift, fight back with iron and flame. That night, from the window, they watch a house burn. The smoke rises above the roofs like a black banner. No one goes to help, no one dares. Willem does not sleep. He packs his few belongings before dawn. But the book goes first, then the hymn, then the typeset he's hidden for years. He cannot stay. The road north is long and dangerous, but there are whispers of safety in Utrecht, in Leiden, maybe even across the sea in England. Marguerite wants to come. Her father says no. She leaves anyway. As they walk, Willem wonders if he will ever print again, if there will be a place someday where he can set the letters in peace, where words will be met with curiosity instead of chains. For now, they keep walking. Behind them, the city fades into fog. Ahead somewhere is the dream the Renaissance promised, a world where light is not punished for simply being seen. The cobblestones of Krakow glisten beneath a thin sheen of ice as the winter of 1582 descends with quiet finality. The city, proud and old, is still wrapped in the regal dignity of its Jagiellonian past, even as it strains to hold on to its place in an ever-shifting Europe. The Renaissance has reached here too, in flourishes, in the arched ceilings of the Collegium Maius, in the careful curves of Latin carved into university walls, in the soft light of candlelit salons where thinkers gather in hushed defiance of tradition. But outside those rooms, in the kitchens, the stables, the cold wooden houses that sprawl like ribs beyond the castle hill, life is harder, harsher, less golden. Zofia, a midwife, walks briskly through the snow-lined alleys with a basket of linen and herbs strapped to her back. Her breath curls into the frost-bitten morning like a prayer, and her steps leave shallow prints in the ice-caked slush. She is 42, lean as a birch, with eyes that do not miss much. Her hands are strong, steady, stained with life and death alike. She has delivered over 200 babies. But she never speaks of numbers. She speaks only of outcomes, of who made it, of who did not. Because in this city of learned men and philosophical discourse, it is still the women who carry blood in their aprons and silence in their mouths. Zofia learned her trade from her mother and her mother from hers, a chain of women stretching back through centuries, hands passing down the knowledge of the womb, the pulse, the breath. She knows how to turn a breech child, how to make a woman's milk flow, how to quiet a newborn's first scream with the gentlest touch. She also knows how easily a life slips away. Infant mortality is a part of daily life. So is maternal death. There are no antiseptics, no anesthesia. When pain comes, it is endured. When fever follows, it is feared. And yet the university, just beyond the square, teaches anatomy to young men with polished boots and Latin tongues, men who will never set foot in the birthing rooms of the poor. They carve cadavers and theorise about humours, while Zofia wipes sweat from a mother's brow and whispers prayers into the straw. She has been called a witch more than once, sometimes for the herbs she uses, sometimes for the way she can sense when a child will not turn, when a woman will bleed too much, when death is already at the threshold. But she is needed, and so, for now, she is left alone. Her home is a single room warmed by a small clay stove. The walls are lined with bundles of dried lavender, mugwort, sage. There is no husband. He died years ago, crushed under a cart in the market. Her only son, Jacob, left for the Baltic coast 2 winters past. She receives a letter once a year, short, careful, grateful. Sometimes she misses the weight of a child on her hip. Sometimes she is grateful for the silence. That morning she is summoned by a nobleman's steward. His wife, a young girl not yet 20, has gone into labour too early. They do not trust the city physicians, too slow, too cold. They want Zofia, the old hand. She follows the steward through snow-covered streets, past the market stalls and frozen fountains, into a manor heavy with velvet and quiet desperation. The young woman is pale, her belly tight with pain, her eyes wide and frightened. Zofia gets to work. She sends for hot water. She has the maids tear linen into strips. She lights a small fire and places her bag near the hearth. Time slows. The labour stretches into dusk. The girl moans, then screams, then weakens. The husband does not come. He waits downstairs with mulled wine and priests. Zofia wraps her arms around the girl when she cannot push any more. She sings softly, words from an old lullaby that no one else in the room understands. And at last, the child comes, but it is silent. Zofia moves quickly, clears the mouth, rubs the chest, breathes softly into tiny lungs. Then a cry, thin, reedy, but real. The room exhales. The girl sobs. The baby is placed on her chest. Zofia stays only long enough to ensure the bleeding is not too much. Then she gathers her things, nods once, leaves through the servant's door. Back outside, the snow has deepened. Lanterns flicker along the streets. She walks slowly now, tired to the bone, her muscles aching from hours hunched and braced. But there is no rest. As she reaches her door, a boy is waiting, red-faced, shivering, barely 13. "Please," he says. "My mother, she's bad." She does not ask questions, she follows. Later she will fall into bed, fully clothed, the taste of smoke and blood still in her throat. But for now she walks again, because that is what women like her do. In this renaissance of men, of treatises and portraits and revolution, there are women who bend over beds, who catch life as it enters the world, who stitch the bleeding and bear the weight and are forgotten before morning. And yet they go on. Because if they stop, the world collapses. Quietly, invisibly, completely. In the walled city of Kyoto, where the cherry blossoms once fell like snow, and the temples echoed with chants that hummed through the pine forests, the year is 1590. But peace, like the petals, has not lasted. The city has been torn by war, then stitched back together by steel-handed unification. The Sengoku period, centuries of civil conflict, is drawing to a close. And though Japan stands on the brink of a new age, the dawn is hard and unforgiving. Masaki is a carpenter. He works in silence, shaping beams for a nobleman's new compound on the northern edge of the city. His hands are scarred, his back bent from years of hauling timber from mountain forests. He is 35, though he looks older. War has aged everyone. He used to build temples, gates, bridges. He was once commissioned to carve the beams of a pagoda near Nara, each piece joined without nails, held only by precision and trust in form. Those were better years. Now he builds walls, strong walls, thick walls, walls designed to withstand fire, arrows and worse. Because in this new order, beauty yields to fear. Masaki serves under the local daimyo, a lord aligned with Toyotomi Hideyoshi, the man who has all but conquered the warring clans of Japan. Hideyoshi promises unity, order, a new beginning, but the cost of peace is control. And Masaki, like many others, feels that cost every day. The old freedoms are gone. Class lines are redrawn with iron ink. The samurai, warriors turned bureaucrats, wear swords not for battle but for intimidation. Farmers are forbidden from owning weapons. Artisans are ranked. Merchants are watched. Everyone knows their place. Masaki's father, once a low-ranking samurai himself, fell into disgrace during the wars. He lost his stipend, lost his land, became a woodcutter, then a drunk, then a corpse. Masaki, a boy at the time, began working before he could read. Now, he speaks little, works hard, pays his dues, but the quiet has not protected him from suspicion. One evening, he returns home to find a notice nailed to the wall outside his workshop. A summons. The magistrate wishes to question him, no reason given. He goes without protest. The chamber is cold, lined with calligraphy scrolls and silent guards. The magistrate, robed and serene, asks him questions with a voice so polite it feels like a blade. Where did you work during the last campaign? Did you speak with any ronin? Have you accepted coin from foreigners? Did you visit the temple at Nanzenji during the New Year? Masaki answers honestly. Carefully. He is not political. He is not foolish. But it does not matter. In this city, suspicion is truth enough. And the foreign threat, the shadow that creeps in through Jesuit priests and whispered conversions, gives the regime its excuse to tighten its grip. Masaki once knew a potter named Jiro who converted to Christianity. Not loudly, just enough to stop offering incense to the ancestors. Enough to sing strange hymns when he thought no one listened. He was arrested during the spring festival. His wife begged in the streets. Their children vanished into silence. Now, crosses are forbidden. Foreign books are burned. Missionaries are hunted, and craftsmen, those who build temples and towers, are expected to serve the old gods, even if they do not believe. Masaki is released. For now, no charges, just a warning. He returns to work the next morning with his head down and tools sharp, but something inside him has shifted. Later that week, he is ordered to carve an inscription into the main gate of the compound. A phrase of loyalty, chosen by the daimyo. The characters are large, bold, unmissable. Masaki nods, accepts the task, but when he works the wood, his knife lingers on certain curves. The script becomes more than just script. It sings in old rhythms, in buried meanings. There is poetry in the grain, resistance not in defiance but in beauty. He finishes before sunset. The guards inspect the work. They nod, satisfied, but Masaki knows he has left something behind. Not a message anyone can read. Not a sign anyone can name. Just a feeling, a tension in the lines, a grace that resists its own cage. That night he walks home slowly. The lanterns sway in the breeze. Across the river he sees monks lighting candles. Somewhere a drum beats. Somewhere a woman sings a lullaby in a language her mother taught her in secret. Masaki lights incense for his father. not because the law demands it, but because the smell reminds him of things that once mattered. Because in a city that now demands silence, remembrance becomes rebellion. The Renaissance, as spoken of in Europe, has not reached Japan, but something else has stirred. Not a rebirth, but a reckoning. The tools that built temples now build walls. The hands that once carved dragons now carve doctrine. But the spirit that guided them, the ancient hunger to shape, to create, to mean something more than survival, that spirit still breathes in men like Masaki, quietly, without permission, and without end. The sun burns high above the dry hills of central Spain, casting long, flickering shadows across the parched earth. The year is 1598, and the once mighty Spanish Empire groans under its own weight, gold-rich but soul-worn, stretched across oceans and riddled with debt. It is the twilight of King Philip II's reign, and though the banners still fly from fortress walls and the churches still gleam with gilded devotion, a strange stillness has begun to creep through the land. In a village pressed between olive groves and dust-blown pastures, an old man named Matteo rises with the creak of the wooden floor beneath his feet. His joints ache, his mouth is dry, his back complains with every breath. He does not remember the last time he slept through the night. Dreams have become uneasy things. Matteo is a scribe, or was when such work was needed. In his youth, he copied legal contracts, land deeds, letters of nobility. His hand was prized for its clarity, its consistency, its graceful curls. There was honour in his ink, stability. But now the scribes are fewer, their work swallowed by the printing press and the bureaucrats in Madrid, who care more for form than elegance. Still, Matteo writes, not for kings or courts, but for himself. Each morning he sharpens a quill, dips it in black ink, and records the world in a leather-bound book. The sound of the wind through the shutters, the way the light falls on the chapel bell, the cough of the neighbour's boy, the way his hands tremble more each day. He writes because it is the only way to make sense of the silence, because outside the village seems frozen in time. Life has become smaller, slower, more afraid. The Inquisition still lingers, its fingers long and patient. It does not burn as brightly now. The great bonfires of heresy have become embers. But its shadow still chills the soul. People know what not to say, what not to read, what not to remember. Matteo's father was burned when he was 10 years old. Not for preaching, not for rebellion, but for owning a Hebrew prayer tucked into the lining of an old robe. Matteo remembers the way the smell clung to his clothes loads, the way no one looked at him afterward. It taught him young. Memory is dangerous, words even more so. Still, he writes. He writes about how the empire grows heavier with each war, the endless drain of treasure and life for lands far away. The ships from the Americas bring gold, yes, but also ghosts. Men return broken or not at all. And the wealth flows only one way, to palaces, to cathedrals, to the royal coffers that never seem full. His cousin's son was conscripted for the campaign in the Low Countries. When they found his body, he was wearing another man's boots and no name. Matteo writes that too. He writes about the people who leave, who vanish in the night with only whispers behind them. Conversos, moriscos, women who were too skilled with herbs, men who asked too many questions. There was a girl once who sat in the fig tree and read aloud from a book of poetry. She disappeared before summer's end. Her family claimed she'd gone to Toledo. But Matteo saw the priest burn her books himself. So the villagers speak less, dream less. They attend mass. They fast, they bow, they survive. But not Matteo, not entirely. Because one day, while dusting the shelves, he finds a forgotten scroll, tucked between the boards of an old trunk, a page of Aristotle, copied in Arabic, translated into Latin, a ghost of Andalusian learning, a relic from before the Reconquest, before the world narrowed. He knows he should burn it, but instead he reads, slowly, carefully, heart-pounding. The ideas are strange, simple yet vast. They ask questions. They refuse easy answers. They speak of virtue, not as obedience, but as the habit of seeking truth. He copies it into his notebook, word by word. He does not show it to anyone. But when he walks through the village square the next morning, he feels different. Not bold, not brave, just awake. Later the priest visits. They drink watered wine and speak of the weather. The priest asks gently about Matteo's health, about his habits, about the little book he always carries. Matteo lies. He smiles, says it's a diary of family recipes, a collection of saintly sayings. The priest leaves, unsatisfied but unable to push further. That night, Matteo cannot sleep. He thinks of the world beyond the hills, of what Spain once was, a tapestry of languages, beliefs, deletes, baits, contradictions. He thinks of the golden age and all it cost. He wonders if anyone will read his words when he is gone. He doubts it, but he writes them anyway, because sometimes, in the middle of a dying empire, with the sky turning red from dust and the bells ringing hollow, writing is all that's left. A rebellion, not of swords, but of memory. The tide rolls in gently along the edge of the English coast, retreating over pebbles and seaweed, leaving behind the soft hiss of foam and wind. It is the year 1607, and the village of Dunwich, once a thriving port, now half swallowed by the sea, sits quiet, forgotten and grey. The Renaissance, in its final gasp before giving way to the storm of the modern age, casts only the faintest glimmer across this shore. Inside a crumbling cottage that leans slightly toward the wind, a man named Thomas Carr scrapes ink onto parchment by the light of a tallow candle. The flame sputters, but he works steadily. His script is careful, measured. This is not poetry or prose. It is not a sermon. It is a list of names. Thomas is the village clerk, though the title holds little meaning now. Most of the town records were lost in the floods years ago, and many of the people those records described have been buried or scattered. He stays because it is the only thing he knows how to do. He stays because someone must remember who once lived here, who died here, who mattered. Outside, the sea groans like an old wound. It has claimed churches, streets, homes. The village once bustled with merchants, sailors, craftsmen. Now it creaks under the weight of memory, and the wind, stronger each year, tears at what remains. But it is not the sea that haunts Thomas, it is silence. The silence of a nation that speaks of greatness, of Elizabeth, of empire, of discovery and enlightenment, while the poor grow hungrier and the gap between power and the powerless widens into a chasm. Thomas was born in London, the bastard son of a weaver and a washerwoman. He learned to read in the church school, learned to write by copying the scriptures over and over until his fingers cramped. A quiet child, a watcher, a listener. He remembers the plague carts in the alleys, the smell of lime and death, the way the bells tolled for days without pause. He remembers a sister who died with her eyes open, a father buried in haste. He left the city for air, for distance, for peace. But peace here is laced with bitterness. Dunwich is dying, not with drama, but with erosion. The sea eats what the wars did not. Young men leave. The church roof leaks. The fields go unploughed. And those who remain do so out of weariness or fear or devotion to the land beneath their feet. Thomas keeps writing. He documents births, even if only one every few years. Deaths, more often. He writes wills for those who still pretend their scraps are worth something. And he listens to the gossip, the prayers, the grief. One day he is asked to write a letter for a widow named Agnes. She cannot read, but she wants her words carried to her son in London. Tell him, she says, that the sea has taken our roof again, that the hens are gone, that I pray for him. Thomas nods, dips his quill. He smooths the paper, and for a moment he cannot write. His chest is tight, because he knows that the boy will never return, that the city changes people, that letters to the country are rarely answered. But he writes it anyway. Later that week, a stranger arrives, a man in fine wool with leather boots and a horse too proud for these roads. He says he's from Cambridge, says he's looking for old texts, pre-Reformation sermons, lost homilies, relics of English thought before the schism. Thomas shows him what little remains, a water-stained prayer book, a fragment of a Saxon psalter, and a hand-copied verse Thomas once found tucked into the wall of the rectory. The stranger is unimpressed. Before he leaves, he asks Thomas what he thinks of the new world, of the colonies across the sea, of the coming century, of the English destiny. Thomas does not answer right away. Then slowly he says, a ship may carry knowledge, but it also carries forgetting. The man frowns, rides off. Thomas watches until he disappears beyond the hill. That evening he climbs to the edge of the cliff and listens to the waves below. They are louder now, more insistent. Every year more land is gone. The graveyard tilts toward the sea. Bones wash up in spring. He thinks of books written in marble halls, of sonnets and treatises and bright eternal ideas, and he thinks of the people he's known. Agnes, the children born hungry, The men broken by war, the women who buried them. The Renaissance for them was not light, it was shadow, cast from far-off fires. Thomas returns to his desk, dips his pen, opens the ledger. He writes, Agnes of the Southend widow, quiet, faithful, one son in the city. Sea took the roof, not her hope. He pauses, adds no more. Somewhere far away, philosophers speak of reason, kings argue over stars, poets chase beauty in moonlit gardens. But here on the edge of England, the world ends slowly, word by word. And Thomas, alone but not voiceless, writes so it will not vanish completely. Because in the end, even as the Renaissance sings its last, someone must remember not just what was built, but what was lost.